Welcome back to an exciting video, and what we're talking about today is the one tone to rule them all, the clean/80s tone. That is correct. I did a video not too long ago where I did the one tone to rule them all, which was my main distorted tone. And like I said, I get a tremendous amount of people ask me about that tone, either off my YouTube channel or when I play live. And I have another tone which is equally as amazing, and it just happens to be my clean tone that we're going to go over right now. And I've had a few people ask me about this also, if I had a clean tone. And while I was working on it, I actually had somebody else ask me, sent me a message and said, "Hey, dude, I watched your one tone to rule them all. Do you happen to have a clean tone for that?" And we were playing a show, and this guy come up to me. We were playing Def Leppard Hysteria, and he's like, "Dude, your tone," he said, "that is literally the best tone I've ever heard on that song." And I was like, "Oh, well, thanks, brother. Cool." And so I thought I would do one on this also. And this tone is actually a little more complicated than my distorted tone, and we're going to go over that. And what I've done, as you can see here, is I've already pre-built it. And because last time I built it during the video to kind of try to speed things up, I pre-built the tone into another patch. And this is my main tone, minus one thing, and which I'm going to explain right now as we go through this. So right here, let's just go ahead and jump in and get started. The only difference between what I use live and this setup is right here. For this setup, I use a Jazz 120. Normally, I use a tube amp in this fractal, but for this instance, I went ahead and did a Jazz 120 in case, a lot of people are using little solid-state amps and stuff now, these little solid-state modeling amps. So I went ahead and thought, well, I'll just do it with a Jazz 120. Now, this tone will work on whatever your setup is. If you have a tube amp, a real amp, a solid-state amp, a digital amp, a modeler, it doesn't matter. This format works the same for everything. What you see here, my chain, is exactly how a chain would work in real life. So if you have the pedals or effects racks or whatever have you, this is the same exact setup. Nothing's going to change. So, and this tone is shockingly good. So get ready. And this is my favorite tone. And so here we go. Let's go ahead and fire this off. So as you can see here, I'm using a Roland Jazz 120, which if you've never played one, phenomenal amps, dude. Absolutely phenomenal. But they're crazy clean, sparkling clean. And like I said, normally I use a tube amp for this, but for this one, I happen just to change it to the Jazz 120, but it's not the one that I use live. I use my fractal live. But as you can see here, I've rolled the bass, the mid, and the treble all out. Now, the reason I did that, the typical 80s tone of all tones that everybody used back then was a very processed tone, which is fine. Got no problem with that. But it was also extremely thin, kind of a bright, brittly sound, which personally I'm not a big fan of. It does have its place, but it's not my favorite thing in the world. So you roll the bass off anyway because they used a very thin tone back then, but I also roll the treble off. I pull the mids out to warm the tone up a little bit so it's just not so brittle sounding. Now what I've got here is I'm just using the Roland 2x12 Jazz 120 with a 121 mic cab on it, which is just a standard cab that would come with this anyway. So here is the tone. Now what I've got here is my Ibanez, but I've got my pickups split off to where kind of like a Fender, if you would put it in the fourth position, this is what it sounds like. And this is my Ibanez in the fourth position. And you can hear this splitting off the single coils. Now this is a good tone as it is. And there may be something you want to use this tone for, whatever it is. On the rare occasion that we play like Creed music or something, I actually use this tone with some reverb on it. So this is the basic tone. Now let's go ahead and add the reverb in. Now what I've got here is I'm using just a studio reverb. Any pedal, any amp model will work. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm running a 2.5 second delay with a room size of 30 at a 25% mix, and it's a bit of reverb. Because that was part of the tone back then. Everything was, like I said, very processed and very very wide sounding. It wasn't as big sounding as what mine is. I think mine has a bigger sound to it. So that gives me a little bit of depth, but I want more depth than this. And a delay just kind of helps add a little more sparkle to everything that happens after the chord is struck. So what I've got here is I've got a digital stereo delay. I'm running at 480 milliseconds. That's just kind of my go-to time on everything. I've got 20% feedback, but I've only got a 10% mix into it. And right here, you could stop. You could absolutely have a fantastic sound right here. But for me, it's still a little sterile sounding. There's not a lot of life to it. You just got a clean, wangy tone with a lot of depth on the back end. So now let's start getting into the things that make this thing actually work. So what it is, if you notice here, it's a little flubby on the bottom and crazy bright on the top, which in the 80s, they got rid of the flub, but they kept the bright. And I'm not a fan of that at all. So as you can see here, I put an EQ on it. This is a standard 10 band. Any EQ will work. And you can see where I've rolled off some of the bottom end, the flub, but I've also rolled off the top end to get rid of some of, just a little bit of that harshness. And you can see how it's cleaned up that bottom a little bit. Especially with a delay, if it's too muddy, then that mud just kind of compounds as the delay's going, and the reverb just makes it bloom and it sounds terrible. So moving through here, now what they've done, the big thing back in the 80s was compression, compression, compression. Personally, I am not a big fan of compression. I think it squeezes the life out of your tone, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Normally, back in the 80s, they'll run the compression up here. Let me go ahead and turn the EQ on, back on. And this is without compression. Let me turn the delay off. This is with compression. And it chokes the life out of your tone. And I'm not a big fan of that. But let's carry on, and I'm going to show you what I do to bring the tone back to life. So let's turn our delay back on. And you can hear there, phone is going crazy as always. Let me mute this real quick. And you can hear there that it's just kind of a lifeless tone. So now let's bring this thing back to life. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the pitch shifting. Now the pitch shifter, as you can see here, I'm only running -8 here and +8. I've got them slammed hard to the side with a 25% mix. And this is going to give me just a little separation. Now, I could crank this up and get a lot of separation, but we're going to add a step after this. So here it is before pitch. And it adds just a touch of separation. And that's really all we need. Now, if you don't have a chorus pedal, you can crank this up. You can move your detune to 9 to 11. Take your pan, pull your pans back to the center a little bit, and increase your mix. And it actually sounds very, very good. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. We'll leave this at 8 right now. But if we take our mix here, let's just move our mix up to 100. And it adds quite a bit. And I can move this pan. I can go -75. And then go 75. And that actually sounds very good right there. That sounds really good. But I've got another step. So let's move this back. Let's take our mix back to 25%. Let's move our pan back to a full minus 100. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's move this back to 100. Bada bing, bada boom. And this is going to cut it down. Because even though this gives me some width, I want it to be super wide. And one of the key things in the 80s to get that classic 80s tone is the chorus. And as you can see here, they used a stereo tri-chorus. Now I got a 7.5 millisecond time. I'm running a mix at 40%. Here it is without. Now with the chorus. Massive difference in the tone. But you can hear it still has the life squeezed out of it completely. So I'm going to show you what I do to bring the life back in and my little secret sauce on top of it. So I'm going to turn everything, all this back off, and we're going to listen to it as the sound builds to do what I do to make this sound literally the greatest sound you've ever heard in your life. It may make you start to cry. It is such a good sound. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to make anybody cry. But it's a sound directly from God. Wait and see. So here's the sound with nothing on it. All right. Let's add in our reverb. Let's add in our delay. Now let's add in our EQ. And you can hear it got rid of some of that flubbiness on the bottom. Let's add in our compression. All right, now let's add our pitch shifter. Now let's add in our chorus. And you can hear, I mean, right there, you're done. That is a great sound. You're done. You can go to bed. You can say goodnight because you now have literally the best clean tone out of everybody you know right there. But to me, this still sounds overly processed, which is what I think compression does. I think it adds a very processed sound to my sound, and it's lost all of its warmth. It's even with all this on it, it still has kind of a sterile sound to it. It's lost all the warmth. So what I do, now you're looking at this and saying, well, dude, why have you got a drive pedal on your clean sound? Well, I mentioned this in my last video. I don't care what you're doing. Putting a drive pedal in front of your amp does nothing but help your amp 1000%, even on a clean sound. So check this out. Like I said, I'm not a massive fan of compression. I do want just a touch, but not a lot. And you can get some off of a good tube amp. As you start to crank it up, it will start to compress itself. But this is obviously a modeler. So what I do, and listen to the difference. This is where the compression is at 6.5. I'm going to turn my compression down to 2. And that already sounds better to my ears, because like I said, I'm not a huge fan of compression. But I'm still missing a little bit of warmth. That is where I add a drive. And I use a very low gain drive. This is a preamp. And I've got the gain set down to 0. I've cut the bass out some more. Because if you look here, what I've done, On my amp, I have my bass cut out to 3. But when I start adding in delay and chorus and reverb, it's going to start to muddy that bottom end, even set at 3. So when I added my EQ, I rolled the bass off a little bit. And then it goes through the compressor, which is going to help tighten it up a little bit. But the drive is actually going to accentuate everything that's in there. So what I've done is I've rolled the bass off a little more on my drive. I've pushed my treble a little bit to offset this treble being down and the roll off here. And check this out. This is before the drive. This is after the drive. It is a massive difference. Now, it does add a little bit of a boost on the front end, as you could tell. I can lower this boost down a little bit. But you can hear how much more life it adds to the sound. Very sterile and very to the point, kicking the drive. Massive, unbelievable difference throwing that drive in. And that is the secret sauce to my clean tone. And like I said, there's a lot going on here for a clean tone. But when you have a tone that is so good that when you're playing live, people compliment on it. And like I said, we were actually doing this song. And somebody came up and said, dude, your tone's actually better than what they used on the album. No, thanks, bro. Thank you. Spent a lot of time making that tone, if I might say so myself. I'm quite proud of it. So this is my overall tone. And it's just, it is a great tone. And it works for so much. Like I said, fantastic on that song. A little bit of Robert Plant, dude. I love Big Log, which, by the way, if you would like a lesson on Big Log, let me know. I'm probably going to do one anyway, but it's kind of down the road. I don't know. I may just jump it up. So I may just do a lesson on Big Log. Absolutely love that song. But the song is just, the tone just works for everything. It absolutely, it covers all spectrums. And I can use it for some strumming stuff. Sometimes I got to take the delay out of it. And I just love the tone. It is just, it works for everything that I do. It has a lot of depth. It has a lot of width to it. And it kind of fills up the room very, very well. So this is my clean tone, the one tone to rule them all. This is the setup for it. And like I said, if you look here, the secret, in my opinion, the secret is lower down your compression. Because I got to be honest, 80% of the time, check it out real quick. I turned my compression off. It just helps bring so much life back to the tone. But I'm running mine at only 2. I got a very light compression on it. But the secret is that drive in the front. Now, you can't use like a tube screamer or something like that, because even at 0, that's probably going to still put out a little bit of gain. You want to use something, a very low gain distortion pedal, or just a clean preamp in front of it. And that will add the life and the warmth back into that tone, because the tone realistically is this. And then we'll wrap this video up. This is what the actual tone would be like to get that 80s tone. That would be it. That is exactly that tone. So I lower my compression down a bit, and then to bring it back to life, I add the preamp in front. And it works brilliantly. So we're going to wrap that video up right there. I hope you liked the video. If you do like the video, please like the video. I know I've said this a million times, but apparently I got to say it all the time, is I will have videos with thousands of views and 3 likes. Damnedest thing I've ever seen. You liking the video helps me get the video out. Please subscribe to the channel. Subscribing costs you nothing. It is absolutely free. And if you don't want to subscribe, at least like it. Help it get out, share the video so we can get it out and help the channel grow. If you do like the things that I do here, please subscribe, because that tremendously, tremendously helps my channel out. So we're going to wrap it up right there till the next video. And like the great Sammy Hagar says, if you miss the beat, you lose the rhythm and nothing falls into place. And no matter what you do, for the love of God, rock on.